If you have a chance to watch television, you really hear or see how human beauty is being praised. But when we read the first, we listen to the first reading this morning, we hear about Jerusalem, the city that was then beautiful, great city. As you hear the songs praise Jerusalem, was nothing before God chose it. So Jerusalem became what it was because of God's grace. God made Jerusalem what Jerusalem became. Somehow, this is exactly what happens with human beings. Even before the fall, before the original sin, we were not divine. So everything that we received was only depending on God's grace. But very often, when God gives us on the right hand, we throw it by the left hand. Because we think we deserve better. We think we deserve more. So this is what God is saying. He's the one who decides to make a covenant with us. He decides to be our friend. He's on one part, we are in the other, but we all become part of his divine life. So what God unites, it's not us to decide to break it. This is what Jerusalem did. Instead of remaining faithful to God, remaining faithful to the one who made her what she became, Jerusalem chose to follow other gods. And we know the result. The prophet Ezekiel writing now is eventually sitting among the exiles in Babylon, the first group of exiles sent to Babylon. Ezekiel is part of it. So he knows what it means to be unfaithful to God, because he's paying the price of the unfaithfulness of his people. And so, each and every one of us, very often, we decide somehow to follow other gods. We look at our beauty, we look at everything that we receive from God, and we say, that's good. Now we can go on. Now we can decide on our own and follow whatever we want, because what we are, eventually it doesn't come from God. Maybe it comes from ourselves. So let's make our own tower, then we can worship ourselves. And God is saying, that's not what I want for you. I want for you an everlasting covenant, which means I want life for you, not death. I want you to remain faithful to me. Do not break what God has united. This is the idea of marriage. That we are in marriage with God. It is not us to decide to say we are no longer in union with God because we want to build our own lives. What about in communities? When we live with one another, how do we express that? Are we able even to tell the other next to us, to the left or to the right or even to the front, say, listen to what the Lord has to say to you? Because this is the mission of Ezekiel. The first word is, speak to Jerusalem. It demands a lot of courage to speak to another person. Especially if we think the person is doing something wrong. Because we never know what the reaction will be. But Ezekiel, knowing all that, especially living in a rebellious house, as we heard yesterday, he went on. He spoke to Jerusalem. I would pray that each and every one here may be like Ezekiel, have the courage to speak, but not to speak like anyway, but to speak tenderly. As like the prophet Isaiah would say, speak tenderly, so that we can bring other people to God, so that we can preserve the unity between human beings and God. Because all of us, we are being prepared for that final day when heaven and earth will be united, the final marriage between heaven and earth, so that under the direction of human, wise human beings, the whole of creation will be able to praise God. Everybody will stand up and say, glorious are you, O Lord, for you have created us, you have redeemed us, you brought us to everlasting